Hey, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. You're here with me. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We look at life through a biblical lens, and we generally try to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. Have you seen the mess that the environmentalists caused up there in North Dakota? You see the pictures of the encampment after they were forcibly removed? Hundreds of environmentalists defied the government's effort to bury an oil pipeline under a small body of water. They said it was sacred burial grounds. It turns out that wasn't true, although there is apparently something nearby that is. They have finally been run off. They were run off by the Donald. But now the cleanup begins. The camp spans more than 1,000 acres, which had been, according to state officials, sensitive wildlife habitat. But now, because of an early thaw and thousands of so-called water protectors, it is now a wet, muddy cesspool of human waste and hazardous fuels from the protesters who turned this native grassland into their own private dumping ground. According to Colonel John Henderson of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, crews have already removed some 250 truckloads of trash. But he says his agency plans to spend upwards of $1.2 million of your money to rehabilitate the area. He said, quote, to ensure that none of this garbage and waste and debris and structures and vehicles ends up in the reservoir. End of quote. Why? Because that would be an absolute environmental catastrophe. North Dakota originally offered protesters to leave peaceably. The state would give them a chit for a hotel room and a bus ticket to anywhere in the U.S. As of last Wednesday night, none had taken it. So they also offered them the courtesy of a ceremonial arrest for anyone needing a picture for their Facebook page. Again, no takers. However, a 17-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy were burned seriously after protesters set fire to the last remnants of the camp. That helps the environment. They both required medical attention. One had to be airlifted to Minneapolis because her injuries were that severe. Gotta love environmentalists. Seems like it's a one-way trip. Do you know who you are? Apparently, it depends on how old you are. Now, I never thought personality was a flexible thing, but a new study says it can change, and it can change dramatically. The study says you are a completely different person at the age of 14 than you will be at age 77. This happens to be apparently the longest study ever conducted on human character. They started this in 1947. I was 4 years old. And scientists from the University of Edinburgh contacted 14-year-olds. And then 60 years later, they went back to these same people who are now 77 years old. In the end, there was no significant stability in any of the 6 characteristics they were testing. Observers say all this should be good news for awkward teenagers wherever they may be. As it turns out, you really do become a completely different person as you get older. So what were the key changes? Well, Dr. Wendy Johnson, who was involved in the research, said, very broadly, adolescents become rather less conscientious, more impulsive, more willing to take risks and seek adventure. They are also more moody or irritable, as well as more social for a few years. Then reverse those trends as they move into adulthood. First, jobs and then parenthood tend to accentuate the trends toward a greater maturity and a better and more stable mood. She said in older folks, people tend to become more accepting of themselves and all that goes with that. But there are large individual differences in these patterns, and lots of that depends on what's going on in a person's life. They did, however, pinpoint some specific trends. As a teenager, many of us become less conscientious, more impulsive, moody, irritable. We also become more social for a few years, then reverse those trends as we move into adulthood. 6 key character traits were taken into consideration: self-confidence, perseverance, stability of mood, conscientiousness, originality, and the desire to excel. They said there was no significant stability in any of these 6 characteristics. The researchers found a fairly low link between conscientiousness and stability of moods, but no link between any of the other traits. Does birth order affect your personality, you ask? We are all under the impression that the oldest child in the family is usually the most responsible. The youngest, the baby of the family, is usually not. But she added that there were large individual differences in these patterns. Lots of these changes, she said, depended on what was going on in the person's life. The researchers suggest that, quote, future studies should focus on developing better understanding of how and why personality changes throughout the life course. There's a new study out, Pew Research Center, looking at evangelicals and their attitude toward the Donald. They found that evangelicals are the only religious group in the United States that Americans have yet to warm up to over the past few years. I said this was about the Donald. It's not. Not everything's about him. It's about what Americans think, feel, when they run into or just think about evangelicals. The survey does not factor in evangelical responses on the one hand. And when it does, 70% of Americans either feel neutral or negative about them. And that's around normal. At the same time, we have warmed up to just about every other so-called faith group: Jews, Buddhists, Catholics, Mormons, Hindus. None of them actually faith groups, by the way. They all operate under law. But interesting, atheists and Muslims improved the most on this so-called feelings thermometer. Now, if they told people what was going on, if an American knows an evangelical, then statistically their feelings toward that group dropped at least 9%. Among millennials, 45% most likely don't even know one. 33% of African Americans don't know an evangelical. One reason they cite may be the fact that evangelicals are increasingly not identifying themselves this way any longer. This study was conducted in January of 2017. How many evangelicals do you know? You say, well, I'm watching a Bible forum. I guess I know people. Did it occur to you that so many people in this country didn't know one? Does that impact how you think about things? Take, for instance, that this idea that there might be upwards of 70 or 80% of Americans that are evangelical, or at least church people. That too is bogus. That's people who know church is important, go to church at Christmas and Easter, look for a church when they want to get married. You know, it's all kinds of people. But people who make church a regular habit, not including those that follow after the legalistic types, the kinds that work off of law. You don't do this, you get that. Those people are a little different, but just people who are actually looking at what the Bible says, believing it, and showing up in church on a regular basis. It's a dwindling group. And most people in the world don't take kindly to you. Isn't that amazing? We're nice people. What's our problem? Yeah. We have beliefs. We have standards. Things we're not willing to change. And that rubs all the ungodly people in this world the wrong way. And it's going to get worse.